So, okay, here we are at lunch. It's time to promote the heck out of the book as best you can. And we can all see clearly that Saba cares enough that she comes on a podcast with you to tell the whole world that the book is available by God Tuesday. Get your copy. How else is Saba helping you to market, and what marketing are you able to do outside of, I assume most in-person events are out or limited?
Yeah, I don't know. 2020 was really depressing. I think in other times there would be doing more. I would be doing more, but it's releasing a book in a pandemic is depressing. So I don't think that I've been hustling / getting out there as much as I would have liked to. But I basically just say yes to everything that anyone asks me to do. Panels, interviews, that sort of thing.
You heard him, bloggers. Send those emails.
Yeah.
He says yes. Get him on your blog. Get him on your site.
And you know, this is not a decision that I made, but it is a thing that has happened anyway. Is that my early reader series, Call Me Max, is currently the center of a lot of controversy in both Utah and in Austin, Texas. So I've been getting a lot of press around those books, and I've been working with a lot of really incredible people in Salt Lake City. So I actually feel like grateful for the opportunity to like work with and support people doing work in those areas. But you know, the question of like, this school decided that your book is inappropriate turns into a conversation about like, are trans people like myself allowed? Full stop. Like, are we allowed? And I always use that as like a invitation to sort of talk about what I see my work contributing to, not just like trans literature, but like sort of like trans cultural creation. And I'm not going to say that like I use it as an excuse to plug my novel, but I say like, here are the ways that trans stories can reshape and reimagine the world instead of just always reacting to transphobia or bigotry. So yeah, I mean, like, I guess thanks Murray and Eaton school districts for the free publicity. It like is coming at the expense of the well-being of like children and families and people in your district, but like, I guess thanks for the free publicity, if you can call that free.
Doesn't sound free, not
the mental
there
tax is a cost, alone. But yeah.
Well, if you're not going to plug your book, plug mine. And Saba, what recommendations are you making for marketing? Since unfortunately we can't plan what schools are gonna start controversies. What options are available to authors during this time of COVID-19? Although I'm optimistic. I agree, 2020 was just the worst, but I have decided, by God, Joe Biden's president. Zack Snyder's Justice League happened. I never thought that would occur. It's a whole new world. I know you're vaccinated. Saba, you've got shot number 1. I've got an appointment to get shot number 1. We're going to turn this thing around. But while we're still in pandemic time, Saba, what marketing recommendations do you have?
So I just basically lay it out kind of very frankly with my authors who are debuting in 2020 and those who are debuting this spring as well. That this is a situation, I mean, you can't expect a book tour or like traveling and all of that. It's not going to happen. I mean, it's very rare even out of pandemic, but now it's definitely not happening. So, you know, I think so what I do is, because I try to schedule a conversation between my authors and their publicity and marketing teams pretty early in advance. I like it to happen around the 8-month, maybe 7-month mark. 6 is pushing it. I think that's a bit too soon, because I want to have those strategizing, brainstorming conversations, especially now. And I think that was even more important last year, because I was like, we need to know, I mean, you need to give us some guidance here. We're kind of all in the dark. What has been working for you? How are you promoting your titles coming out right now versus say the one that we want you to promote for us, with us in 6 months from now? What's working? What do you recommend we do in preparation for when our book comes out? And a lot of the advice we got was, you know, honestly, we really don't know what's working. It's too early. It's just the timeline. We don't have data. But obviously, you know, doing remote panels and doing sort of virtual panels, virtual launches is what we've shifted to entirely, and we're not sure that it necessarily pushes the needle on sales, but it is what we're doing. It is what's giving our books, you know, airtime, so to speak, or just an opportunity for us to talk about them and get it in front of people's eyes, especially the people who are on social media, because that's the only way we're connected right now. So the good news is, because it was all virtual, we were able to come up with a lot of interesting panels with people who are not necessarily local to the people whose books, to my clients. So we actually came up with some panels with authors or wouldn't have otherwise be able to travel to all meet in the same place. So we're taking advantage of that, which is nice. I think just some of the challenges have actually been, you know, there are so, you can feel like you can do many panels, say for example, a one book launch, and then maybe 3 or 4 panels within the same, say 2 or 3 week span of the book launch. But it's just, you know, I think in the effort to try and do as much as you can, given that it's a pandemic, a lot of my authors and other authors I'm seeing are burning out really fast, because it's quite taxing to do all of this work remotely, you know, be on all the time and then talk about your book in front of a screen and not sort of feel those positive vibes of people coming up to you and just making you feel good about being a writer, signing your books in person for someone, meeting children at a reading as opposed to reading out on a screen. It's not the same thing. And I'm sure, Kyle, you can speak more on that. So I've actually been advising my authors to try and not go overboard on the virtual thing. You know, like, I think it's good to definitely have some kind of a launch event, maybe plan a couple of panels, but don't overschedule just because you feel like you should or you can, because everything is virtual. Because again, it's important to remember these things don't necessarily move the needle on sales as much. It's just something for you to do so that you're viewed by your publisher and other people in the industry as someone who's doing stuff, you know, an author who has their stuff all figured out and who's like being present on social media and talking about their book in this entrepreneurial way, which is all great. But I think the balance needs to be maintained of how much can you do that will make sense for you to do, that is positive for your book, that doesn't take away from your well of mental health and well-being, you know. So I think generally speaking, overall, I would say finding your community, trying to come up with panels with maybe some friends of yours who are writing similar themes or definitely in the same category and genre. And I'm actually recommending my authors plan for panels many months in advance and not try and just pack them together, just because it's much more useful to have an event where you can talk about your book in a meaningful way in conversation with other people, with time space in between, just because it keeps you on the radar of people who are interested in learning about new books for a longer span of time. So that's the kind of, you know, feedback we're getting from publicists and my friends who are publicists and marketing people. I try to sort of keep in touch with them on personal level and be like, tell me what's working so I can tell my authors what's working and things like that. And, you know, other than that, just trying to follow up with publicists and marketing people and saying, so what's the tenor right now? What's the pitch? Like, how do you feel about us doing, I know I have a book coming out in August as well. And it's kind of up in the air. We're not sure if we're going to do in person or not. And so I have to keep kind of every 3 weeks or so, get a vibe of, are we doing in person? Are we not doing in person? How are you feeling? How are you feeling? You know, and to sort of keep the conversation going. And I keep trying to ask everyone involved, what are you seeing with titles that came out, say, in January? Like, how do you think, you know, what are you seeing spikes in sales coming from certain events? If it's, you know, a specific launch event, or if it's, you know, Oprah mentioned the book, or it was on the Today Show, or whatever, you know, like there are certain things that we really push for. I always ask my authors, you know, who are your reach people who you really wish, like some celebrity who wants to read your book. And it's harder with Kyle. I don't even think we had this conversation with Kyle, because celebrities don't read middle grade, you know, just generally. But like picture books, for example, lots of celebrities will, especially those with children, will pick up a picture book. And so we always have that conversation of who are your reach celebrities, and let's hustle and try to get their contact information. Let's find their assistant. So that's the kind of thing we're kind of hoping will help, because since everything's moved onto social media, we're really just trying to amp up visibility and conversation about the books across all channels in any way we can, because it's been so difficult to actually have those in-person events. Well, impossible really. So I think that's what we're doing. I mean, you know, it's been very bizarre, and I'm interested in seeing how these methods and these conversations change as we shift back into post-pandemic life. I'm not sure necessarily that people will be as excited to move to in-person completely, which I actually think is not a bad idea, because I think there's been a lot of interesting reach. Audiences that would not have necessarily had as much access to certain authors now have so much access to them, because they're not all of these events tend to be in New York, right? New York City. A lot of these authors, even if they're not local to New York City, will often travel to New York City to have their launch, because that's the glamorous thing to do, especially in adult fiction and nonfiction. So now, because that's not the case, I think we're seeing a lot of communities respond to authors making themselves present online to books that they wouldn't have necessarily had that exposure to. And I love that. And I think that that's something, if I were ever asked what my opinion was by some publicist, which I don't think will happen because I am not a publicist, I think—
Pretend I am. I'm asking. Go ahead.
Okay. I think that's such a valuable thing. I think maintaining a healthy balance between doing virtual events and not would be great. They were happening before the pandemic, but it was very rare. It was just, I remember thinking, because I'm not in New York City, I always knew when an author was doing a virtual event, because it was always exciting. I would always sort of bookmark it, like, okay, oh my God, this author is actually going to do something online. I get to see them speak or hear them speak, and that's so great. And it doesn't ever happen. So I remember, now obviously I don't feel that way anymore, because that's kind of the modus operandi, but I hope that doesn't change, because there are so many communities, not just in the United States, but all over the world, like where we love the fact that, you know, we can actually just zoom into this stuff and, you know, have this opportunity to hear from authors, and, you know, perhaps not have their launch parties online, but just have more panels where they're making themselves more accessible to people who wouldn't otherwise have had that access.
A quick counter argument, because I've got a number of favorite authors who I see are very active on social media, but then it's been a couple of years since their last book. So every time I see a long Facebook, I'm like, that long Facebook post, that could have been another chapter in your book. Write another book. I need it.
Oh my gosh, that's such an agent thing to say, by the way. Just saying.